You are listening to Interesting Canadian Mormons, a podcast featuring conversations with interesting Latter-day Saints from across Canada. I am your host, Samson Nordquist. Today, my guest is Viola Nabrotzky. I'm glad I was able to catch Viola for this interview just days before moving away to the United States to be married. In this interview, Viola shares her perspective on the plan of salvation and on the principle of hope. Because when it comes to faith, hope, and charity, well, we all know what charity is, and we all know what faith is. But we too often overlook the important role hope plays in our lives. Viola shares her perspective on that. Discover with me what makes Viola Nabrotzky an interesting Canadian Mormon. Today, I'm extremely excited to have my very special guest with me today, Viola Nabrotzky. Hello.
Hello.
It's a very beautiful home that you have here.
And the balcony was just built by my two nephews. And it's become my favorite place in the whole home immediately.
When was it? It was a couple of weeks ago that they...
A week ago.
A week ago?
Yeah, and that's when I discovered that it's like a green cathedral under this maple tree. So makes it very private and just an oasis.
It's a beautiful, beautiful addition to the home, and unfortunately, you don't get to enjoy it that much longer.
I don't.
You're moving away, I understand.
I am. I'm moving to California in 2 weeks, and getting married in 3 weeks, unless if all goes well. There's a visa between here and there that has to be issued, but assuming there aren't any hitches there, yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And, that's very exciting, and we're all going to be very, very sad to see you leave Canada. And so while you're still in Canada, I've got to get you on Interesting Canadian Mormons, because once you're gone, are you going to become an American, or are you going to stay Canadian, or? Well,
I'll definitely still stay Canadian, but we'll apply for citizenship down the road.
So you have dual? You'll eventually have dual?
So the first thing is the fiancé visa. The second thing is the resident status, right? And then I don't know what comes after that.
All right. Well, it sounds like a very exciting time in your life.
It is.
So, well, there's a whole bunch of stuff that makes you a very interesting person, and I know we won't be able to talk about everything because there's just simply not enough time. But before we get into anything specific, I'd like to just get to know you a little bit and introduce you to our listeners. There's some that know you, and there's probably a lot that don't know you. And if you could kind of give us a little bit of background on you, on Viola Nabrotzky. Where were you born? Where did you come from?
I was born here in Kitchener. Was raised in Teeswater, a little town of 1,000 people, or 999, depending on which way you drove into town. The signs were different. Raised in the church by parents who were the converts. That's a rather fun story as well. Don't know if would you like me to go into that?
Yes, talk about that.
So my parents are immigrants from Germany. My father came over first because he didn't want to ever have to be a soldier, and so my mother followed a year later. They'd already had an understanding in Germany, and they married here, had 2 daughters, and they decided to start attending church because they felt that their daughters should be raised with religion. And so they, like many good Germans, went to the Lutheran church. Mm-hmm. And still being a little uncertain about the English language, one day the minister told them he was going to send 2 men by that afternoon to collect some money for the church. And so sure enough, that afternoon 2 men showed up, and as soon as my dad understood the word church, he let them in. And they were talking about this good news, and he was like, well, how can this be good news if you want money and we're poor, right? It took them about 20 minutes to figure out the mix-up. The good news was that there was a prophet on the earth again, and they didn't want any money, and, it went from there. Anyways, my parents...
But it was a different set of 2 men?
Yeah.
That showed up?
They were LDS missionaries.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I ever since I understood that story, I've always understood the Lord had a good sense of humor, and that he really knows us. There's no other way he would have gotten those missionaries past my dad's door. So that was really kind of cool. And they joined...
What year was it?
A little over a year. That would have been mid-50s.
All right.
Yeah, mid to late 50s.
And that was right here in Kitchener,
here in
right?
Kitchener, yeah.
Was this at the Lorraine building, by chance?
I don't know if the Lorraine building was built by then. So I know that it had to have been before 1950 because my brother's older than that, and his name's Nephi, so you kind of get the idea that it was a little before that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And this was there no church building at this point? Or was there a little tiny meeting house? Or
I think they met at the Olsons or something like that. I don't know what the history is there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We moved away when I wasn't quite 2 yet.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
yeah, we moved up to Teeswater.
All right. Well, that's another podcast for another interesting Mormon out there.
There you go. Not me. Yep.
All right. Well, that's fascinating. Okay. So, in your family, how many siblings do you have?
It depends on how you count. So I have 5 that are living.
Okay.
2 foster brothers that I grew up with, and 1 brother who died as a baby.
I'm not that quick in the math.
I know.
How many is
I can never really figure that out either. So there's if you count everybody, it's 9 of us.
9. Wow. Wow, that's quite a family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is it typical of German families to be big like that?
I don't think so. But, you add my parents were pretty traditional, and you add the LDS religion in there too, then,
Are your parents still alive today?
No. No, they died when I was a teenager.
Oh, they did? I didn't know that.
Yeah, my father died of leukemia.
Oh, wow.
In 77, and my mother died in a tractor accident in 1980.
Wow. And where do you fall in the line of siblings? Are you in the middle there or something?
In the middle, yeah. I'm the 3rd from the bottom.
Wow, so a lot of you were quite young when both your parents...
I was 13 and 16.
Wow.
Which gives my age away there. I don't know if I should put that in there.
I'm not that quick in the math, so... Well, wow, that must have been traumatic for you.
It was. It actually... I was challenged by that, not because it was traumatic, but because I wasn't in touch with my feelings around that, right? That was part of the challenge, and has really shaped part of who I am now, is that because I had a testimony of the gospel, because I knew the plan of salvation, for me that translated into I shouldn't be sad, right? I mean, my mother woke me up the morning that my dad had died and told me that my father had gone to be with my brother Mark, the one that had died as a baby, who, even though he was older than me and died before I was born, I'd always felt quite a connection to. And so I thought, well, that's only fair. I mean, I've had him for 13 years, now Mark gets to have him for a period of time, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't mourn, and that had severe consequences for me because I didn't understand how important that was. And then after my mission, I did finally get in touch with those feelings. I was able to mourn. And it also made me pay a lot more attention to the plan of salvation as a result, and which is one of the things that I love. So
you must have been quite mature as a teenager. You grew up kind of fast. Yeah?
Yes. I suppose, in some ways, right? I think as far as responsibilities go, that kind of thing, I was probably more mature than most, but socially, I was much less mature than most, right? I grew up in a tiny, tiny branch that I was always the only girl in my class, so that there's different ways to be mature, and some of them I was good at, some of them not so much.
Wow. Did you have parents after, did anybody step in as parent figures for you?
Well, when my mother died, there were 4 of us still at home. So my oldest sister was married and expecting her first child. The next sister lived at home, my sister Flora, and she kind of headed up our family. My brother Nephi was on his mission in Germany, and he had a feeling before he left that she wouldn't be alive when he came home. And so he was prepared for that. And then me, and then my younger brother and sister. And so, we had an adult, someone over 18 in the home, and we'd been taught to be self-reliant, and so we were.
Yeah, for sure. So you went on a mission.
I did.
What age were you when you left?
21.
21.
Yeah. To Houston, Texas, Spanish-speaking.
Wow, I didn't know you spoke Spanish.
Like a gringa, but yeah.
How was your mission?
It was great. Yeah, I'd always looked forward to doing that. That's, it had always been something that was in my plan.
You knew from an early age that you would go?
I did, yeah. And I had a lot of people tell me that I probably wouldn't make it that far, but I just knew.
Really?
I would. Yeah.
Who would tell you that?
Oh, just that, I'd get married or something like that, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah. But that was always something I really felt strongly about doing and that I loved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you learn on your mission?
Well, my favorite thing to teach was the plan of salvation. You keep coming back to that.
Okay.
I was thinking earlier today about some of my mission experiences, and two things that came to mind. Just one, the difference that the gospel makes in people's lives, and the other is the plan of salvation. So my favorite discussion to teach was the plan of salvation, and my companion and I had one companion for quite a long time, and so when we'd teach the plan of salvation, and then we'd come home and we'd study it some more, because so many questions would come up for us that an investigator might not ask, but we were asking ourselves, right? So we'd go home and we'd study those out, and it just made things much more rich, right? Anyway, this one day, my companion and I went to teach a less active member and his non-member wife, and they weren't home. And so, but there was a young man that answered the door. His name was Luis. And so we asked him, well, would you like to hear the discussions? And the plan of salvation was the third discussion. But that day, both my companion and I felt impressed to teach the plan of salvation, to do that one first. So we started in on that, and he seemed really interested in what we were talking about. But as we taught him, his face just got darker and darker, and it was clear that he was having a hard time, and yet he was engaged and pleasant and, all of that stuff. So we really didn't understand what was going on. Anyway, we came back the next day, and both of us felt impressed to teach exactly the same discussion all over again. And this time, as we taught it, it was like his face just got brighter and brighter and brighter. And at the end of it, we asked him, what was that, right? And he said, well, my brother is a Catholic priest, and I've had a lot of engagement with that religion, right? And so as you were teaching me yesterday, it was like you were brick by brick, you were pulling out my whole foundation. You just were pulling everything apart, and it left me in limbo. I didn't know what to do with all of that. And today, as you taught it again, it was like you were rebuilding the foundation, only now it was this amazing thing, right? So that was a pretty cool experience.
Amazing, yeah. This is all in Spanish that you're speaking?
Yep, this was in Spanish.
Yeah. Wow.
But I served in the States, right? So you don't get completely immersed. So
right.
I do still, I wish my vocabulary were better. I wish I had a friend in Guatemala when I went to law school, which was in Denver, who ramped my Spanish back up, right? And now there's been a number of years where I haven't used it as much. Occasionally I'll have a client who's a monolingual Spanish speaker, and so I get a little bit of practice that way, but not what I would need to really feel completely comfortable.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. So you followed a prompting, which is obviously that's an important thing to do.
Well, it came to both of us, right? To both my companion, I had that impression, right?
Yeah.
And as it turned out, that was...
Yeah, to first of all teach that discussion and then to teach it again,
That was the unusual part.
That's a little bit, unusual, and to still know that was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting.
Yeah.
A blessing.
Yeah. Do you find in your, today, are you still close to the Spirit in that way, where you'll get promptings to do things that seem unusual, but you know that they're promptings and you go and do them? Or?
Yes, although I think all of us would say that we don't hear those promptings often enough, right? We wish that we had more of that.
Yeah.
But the prompting that comes to mind is to just stay quiet sometimes, and to let someone just talk, to really be able to hear them. But occasionally those promptings come.
All right. So take us to after your mission. You come home. What did you do? I guess you were 23 or 22? 22 or 23?
23, I guess.
23?
Yeah.
When you get back.
So, well, before my mission, I'd gone to university for a year and, almost 2 years.
Oh, where did you go?
I went to University of Western Ontario, and I was studying English just in a general program, but I didn't do very well. So, in fact, I did so poorly that I actually flunked out and they asked me to leave.
Oh, really?
Yes. Because I had severe problems with procrastination and all that kind of stuff, right? And I went to see a wise stake president who had known my parents, and this is before my mission, who helped me to understand that there were reasons that I didn't understand why I might have some challenges with that. The unexplored grief, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And then when I came back from my mission, I applied to BYU, didn't get in, and justifiably so. I mean, there's so many people that are applying that don't have my academic record. And so I didn't get in. I appealed that decision because I felt prompted to go to BYU. And so I thought, well, there just must be a way to do it if only I could be diligent about that. And so I went to see another stake president, again, very wise, who pointed out to me, who taught me about justice, whereas the one before my mission had taught me about mercy. And so between these two stake presidents, I had this amazing lesson, and my own flunking out of university, this amazing lesson on how much the Lord loves us, even though we may fail, and how there can be understanding that helps us feel compassion for those who don't live up to our expectations or to their own hopes or dreams. And yet that, there's a justice aspect to that too, that justice does have to be paid in some ways. So that kind of, I really appreciate that lesson, although I would have liked to have learned it without that horrible experience. But that had an impact on me too, in formulating how I think and how I see people. And, So when I came home from my mission, I was trying to figure out what to do, didn't get into BYU obviously, and one of those impressions came as I was washing out some old canning jars for one of my sisters. I had the impression to go, and I knew that go meant Calgary. I'm not quite sure, I can't remember how I knew that, but I knew that meant Calgary. And so I followed that prompting, even though Calgary was going into the West was kind of in a bit of a bust, and Ontario was going into a bit of a boom. And so even the gas station attendant told me I was going the wrong way, but I knew the prompting I'd received, and so off I went. I got there just in time for the Calgary Olympics, and that was just wonderful to be there. That was where I kind of found myself. And
so you went out there and attended school, or was
not
this...
at first. I just started working.
Just to work.
Worked at a greenhouse, then did some programming schooling, and then
computers.
Yep, with Honeywell Bull. I started working at the University of Calgary, and while I was at the University of Calgary, I started taking courses on the side.
Oh, okay.
And that's eventually finished my undergrad. So.
Oh wow, fascinating.
Mm-hmm. I didn't go back to graduate school until I was quite a lot older. Yeah, turning 40, I think, around about there.
So, now I didn't know that about you. I didn't know you had a computer. Well, is it more like
it's not something I advertise because I might as well not have it, right? All I can remember is the language of programming.
Is it like PLC language or?
Sorry, the logic of programming, not the language.
Yeah.
So I can remember the logic of programming, and that helps me to understand that if I can think of a way that I could program it, it's probably in the program already, right? But that's I'm not a big computer.
But okay.
Gizmo, like I avoid that where I can.
Okay. Now that being a computer person is one thing, but being a logical thinker, are you a logical thinker?
Probably.
You would say, yeah, logical, sequential, as opposed to what's the other one? I forget the opposite. The opposite of that, which is like I don't know what there is a proper name for it. Sporadic or.
Yeah,
basically,
I'm probably more of a logical thinker.
You're more logical, sequential kind of.
Yeah. I'm not terribly. I'm probably more left brain than right brain. Wait, right brain than left brain. There you go.
Right brain is more logical and things.
Right.
Kind of.
So
make sense.
I'm not the greatest artist, or that whole artistic sense is not as developed in me as I would like. I leave that to my sisters. Yeah.
Now it's funny you say that because I do see you play piano lately every week for like Prelude, doing an awesome duet with the great Gordon Green.
Yes.
He plays the organ, you play the piano.
Well, I just
together.
play the hymns, and he just does whatever he does to make it sound good, right? So that covers up quite a lot of mistakes.
Well, it sounds great.
Well, thank you.
It's quite a treat too, because it's rare you get to hear piano in Prelude, let alone piano with organ. And
well, now I can't really. I don't think I should get any accolades for that. People used to thank me for playing the Prelude, but actually it's because I'm not that social. So people don't come and talk to you at the piano very much. It's a way to. I dated someone who liked to get to church early so that he could do a number of things, and so. But I didn't want to sit there and. It's horrible to say, but I didn't want to sit there and talk to everybody because I'm, by nature, fairly shy. Well, I know that's a contradiction with some of the things I do, but so I'd go up and play Prelude. And it was also a way to practice the piano because that's pretty much the only time I did.
That's a sneaky way of getting out of being social.
It really is. It works.
But you're quite good. I know, you are called on regularly to play piano. Like when someone, hey, we need someone to play piano.
No, actually, that's not quite true. People know, those who know me well, know that I'm not that great at playing, and so they only call on me as a last resort.
Oh,
yes.
No.
So in my old ward, that one of the counselors in the bishopric, they waited until right like the second before the meeting was going to start in hopes that somebody who actually knew how to play the organ would come in, right? And so finally he came over to me and he said, would you be willing to play for the meetings? And I said, okay. Would you like me to move over to the organ? He says, no, that's okay. You can stay at the piano. Because no one had seen me even on the organ, didn't even know I knew how to turn it on, right? Because I hid that light under a bushel. And it's not that I can play it well. It's just that, I can hit the right keys.
Oh, well, maybe, I don't know. I think you're being too hard on yourself because you do play very well.
Thank you.
When I see you play, I'm a little jealous because I do play piano, but I can't read worth a dime.
You can play everything.
I can't read worth a dime though. I wish I could do that. When people call upon me to play, hey Sam, you play piano, and I'm like, yeah, but I can't read, so I can't help them.
Bring back to your recollection that we were in primary the other day, where we both teach, and they asked me to play for primary, and I was horrible, and you took over, and that was wonderful.
I tell you though, I didn't read that. I can't read that. So
I know, that's what I'm saying. I can read music, but I'm not very good at playing what I read. Well, you can't read it, but you can play anything. So there you go.
No. Well, I don't know. When you've played, and do you have a piano when you're home?
I did until I moved, and my brother begged me not to have to move that big galoot, so I'll have a piano again when I move.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Fantastic. Because honestly, in my humble opinion, I think you're very good. You're very good. And so
enough about that. Cut most of that out.
All right.
If not all of it.
All right. So you're in Calgary. Mm-hmm. You're working. You've got your undergrad. And where do you go from there?
Well, I was doing administration, and I decided to quit because I wanted to do something that was more involved with people. That was, less to do with just administering things and budgets and all that kind of stuff, secretarial type things. I wanted to do something that made more of a difference to people, to be more, closer to the front lines. And but I didn't know what to do with that. I was interested in social work, and so I explored that, but it just didn't feel right. And so I just kind of twiddled my thumbs for a while. And I ended up coming back to Ontario for a couple of years to help out with some family stuff. And then went back, started working again in administration. And then my uncle died. So I came back for the funeral and sat down next to my aunt. Greeted my aunt, first of all. And she said hello, and then she immediately launched into this whole thing about how I wasn't really doing anything with my life. I didn't have a real job. I had planned to go back to school, and I hadn't. I'd hoped to get married, and I hadn't. I mean, it just,
Oh, boy.
Basically, yeah. She just laid into me. And this conversation's happening in German. And she didn't ever talk to me like that before. I mean, we don't get much chance to spend time together even, but she just was really adamant and really in my face about it. I was like, whoa, I didn't get that, right?
And in German. I actually didn't know you spoke German, too.
My parents spoke German at home, so...
Yeah.
Anyway, so we got separated, thankfully, and then I sat down next to her just before the funeral started, and she launched right back into it. And I finally just looked at her and said, is there anything about me or my life that you approve of? And she got right in my face and she said, yes, you! And I was like, okay then. Anyway, so the rest of the day, every time she saw me, she was right back into it, to the point where my siblings formed a human wall around me, so she couldn't get anywhere close.
Wow.
And my brother pulled me out to go for a walk, and he said, she just has no concept of what you have done in your life and the difference that you've made. And I said, you're right, she doesn't. She doesn't live here, she's not LDS, she doesn't have the same perspective, perhaps, but she's right too. I do need to do all of those things, and it's time that I get on it. I'm not getting any younger. So I went back to Calgary, and I tried to figure out what to do, because the social work hadn't worked out, and that's what I had been interested in. I didn't know, because there was too many things that interest me. And so I started looking at my daydreams. I was quite an avid daydreamer then, not so much now. I hardly ever daydream now.
Too busy now? Or?
I don't know. Maybe I'm just living the dream. So, and I started realizing that there were 5 things in the background of every daydream. I was a lawyer. I was a therapist of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
I had some kind of background in public, or was doing something in public policy. I was using my languages, and I was doing, or had some connection to natural healing. And so I thought, okay, well, nothing really stands out as the one that I should pursue, and social work, which is one of the 5, didn't really, the path seemed blocked. And so I decided I'd just pick a couple of the other ones. I'd just start down the path and see what works out, right? So I signed up for a translation exam, and then I went looking for what I had to do to get into law school, and that was the LSAT. Well, the first time I could have written that was the same day as the translation exam. So I signed up for the next one a month later. I passed the translation exam, passed the LSAT with good enough scores to be able to apply to decent law schools, and I thought, well, why not, right? I'm not ready to go. I'd actually only taken the 2 exams then to see how bad they were, and that I'd really prepare for the next year, right?
Mm-hmm.
But why not? I mean, the path is still open, so I'll keep taking steps, and before I knew it, I was in law school. And then my first semester of law school, the lady that I lived with, I went to the Chancellor's dinner, invited me along. We happened to be sitting with the mucky-mucks of the social work school, Graduate School of Social Work, and they said, you should be doing a dual degree. And I didn't know such a thing existed, and so I thought, that sounds really interesting. But before I managed to do that, I received a brochure on public policy and doing a dual degree with law and public policy. And so before I knew it, I was signed up for that. I don't even know how I got there, quite frankly. It just kind of happened.
Sort of like almost all 5 of the things on your list are starting to come true here.
So I did, I started the Master's in Public Policy, which I didn't finish. I did everything but the mini thesis, so I got the education but not the letters behind my name.
Mm-hmm.
So I started law school one year, the next year started the Master's in Public Policy, the following year started the Master's in Social Work, which I did complete, and I did postgraduate training in marriage and family therapy. During that, I took a 4-day course in one of the energy healing modalities that I had been interested in. And while I didn't pursue the translation any further, I do sometimes have clients in either of those languages, and so it's kind of still there. So yes, I do feel like everything is,
I guess you don't have to daydream when you're living the dream. You're right.
It's been fun. It's been fun to see how all of those fit together somehow, right?
So let me ask you, do you think your aunt was inspired to give you a good kick in the pants?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And boy, was it a kick in the pants. Yeah, in fact, when just last week, I wrote to my uncle, her brother, and said, everything that she told me now to do, the last one is coming down the pipes, right? In 3 weeks, I'm going to be married, and that's kind of the last one that she said. Well, I'll be without a job again, but I'm self-employed, and so that's easy to start once I'm able to work, And it's just, I'm so grateful to her, so grateful that she followed that prompt. It was almost like an obsession with her, that she did it.
Was she normally like that?
No, she'd never talked to me like that before or since. So, yeah, she was a very strong woman, and single, older, never married, right? Never had children.
Mm-hmm.
And she and I had the opportunity to spend quite a lot of time together a few years before. When I was at the University of Calgary, I had taken a 4-month leave of absence, and I'd gone traveling, and in Europe and spent quite a lot of that time with her. So she knew me well. But now had decided, I don't know what possessed her that day, but I'm sure it was inspired, and I'm so grateful. And I'm sure she's just laughing and smiling ear to ear up there. So,
wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I've seen you teach in the past. Unfortunately, I haven't seen you teach on too many occasions because I've never had the opportunity to be in your classes. But I know you teach now.
I was in one of your classes one day and was blown away.
Oh, yeah, well, don't talk about that.
Yeah, well.
Don't talk about. I remember you. I've seen you give sacrament talks. I've seen you. I think you were teaching my kids on one occasion, just something out of the scriptures, and you currently teach primary. So I haven't had too many occasions to see you in action, but I've seen enough to know that you are a very gifted teacher.
Thank you.
And so I wanted to ask you, while we're still in this stage of your life, talking about your education, did you have any teachers that were very influential in your life?
I don't know that I had teachers that were very influential as far as how they taught, but I did have teachers that were influential in how I thought about learning or how I felt about being in class. So I had and perhaps most of it actually comes from my father, where he fostered my curiosity. Now, I remember a family home evening lesson when I was 13. It was just before he died. My family had been called to live and work on the welfare farm, to start the welfare farm that was in St. Catharines or Jordan Station, way back then. And so I know it was down there, and we moved from there when my father passed away. So that puts it in a time frame for me. I must have been 12 or 13. And we had this family home evening lesson. I believe it was on the Plan of Salvation. And and at the end of it, I was continuing to ask him questions. And I guess finally I'd asked so many that one of my siblings said, "Viola, that's enough," right? And my dad said, "No, these are good questions, and she can ask as many as she likes." So that gave me a freedom to explore. And I think what I don't really know where that teaching thing comes from. And it doesn't always work, but when it does work, it's just it's wanting them to feel what I feel when I live the gospel, right? That's where it comes from.
So you haven't had any formal teachers, college training or anything like that?
No. I was voted the most likely to become a teacher in grade 13, but I never went there. So, yeah.
Well, from what I've observed, you have a very, it seems effortless when you do teach to make the scriptures come alive. Scriptures, like, nobody opens the book of Habakkuk in sacrament reading, but you do, and you make it so interesting and so relevant.
It's actually Haggai, I think, that you're talking about.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
I can't remember anything in Habakkuk.
Okay, I'm sorry. Haggai. No one opens Haggai in the sacrament reading and makes it come so alive.
I love the scriptures. I love the scriptures. And I find them so relevant to me. And so what makes teaching, if it's effortless, what makes it effortless is simply thinking about how this concept applies to me. And if it applies to me, it probably applies to more than me. And that's what I'm sharing. It's not, doctrinal knowledge, or maybe there's some of that, but it's more just these relate. They're relevant to me.
Well, yeah, you make it very, very relatable. It's not just a history lesson. It's not just, these are the, textbook answers. It's like, this is what the scriptures say, and this is why it is relevant. And you make it. Oh, I can't think of the scripture off the top of my head. I'm sorry, but you make it so. Like I can go home and start using it right away. And that's a gift.
Thank you.
That's a gift that you have.
It's a blessing.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're gonna miss your teaching when you do leave. And I know your class is very lucky. I know You do teach primary right now. What age group do you have?
I have the 11-year-olds. I only have one, sometimes two, youth in my class, right? And so last Sunday we did have two, and so the young man that is normally in my class, he gave the opening prayer as he usually does, because there's only him for opening, me for closing usually. And he said, "Thank you that there's someone else in my class today so that I don't have to." He's got my intense focus on him the whole time. I don't know if that's such a good thing.
Well, you're the ones in your class are very, very blessed to have you there.
Thank you.
So
I enjoy doing it. It's a joy for me to be able to share those things.
Yeah. Okay. Viola, tell me a little bit about your fiancé. I know you're getting married.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're very happy to be getting married.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about him.
His name is Mike Fawn, and he's a farmer. And in Woodland, California, which is just outside of Sacramento, he and his brother farm a farm that their father started in the late 40s, early 50s. Their primary crop is tomatoes. Much of that, or most of the farm, is organic. But they have other row crops, and he's a convert to the church, joined in his early 20s, served a mission in Hong Kong. Still the only member in his family. We'll have to work on that some. Just a good, kind,
it's amazing.
loves me man.
How did you meet him?
I met him online.
Yeah?
Yeah, just we were both part of an LDS website, and he smiled at me one day, and I've been on that website for quite a long time, simply because I am single. I ought to be doing something about that, and but so it was one way of feeling like I wasn't totally ignoring that part of my life, but I wasn't very active on it. He smiled at me, and I checked out his profile. And what caught me was that in the ways that he thought he could improve, the thing that he listed was developing the traits of deity. And that just made me curious, and made me feel safe contacting him back. So I smiled back. He emailed back. I emailed back. By the end of the week, he was angling for my phone number. I gave him my brother's phone number where I was staying at the time, because I figured that way, if he turns out to be scary, then it's my brother's phone number. He can take care of that. And And pretty soon we were talking about meeting. We met up. That went well. Just we went from there.
That's wonderful. That's
yeah.
wonderful. You know what? You're the second person that I've interviewed for these podcasts that have met online with their spouse.
Really?
Yeah. There's something to say about that, and I asked them, "Hey, was that a little bit scary? There's there's all kinds of stories out there, but is it actually not too bad of an experience? Obviously, it's worked out for them.
Obviously, it worked out wonderfully for me.
Worked out for you, and
and
so maybe we're just kind of busting those stereotypes.
Well, I think there's still due diligence required there, right? You still need to spend time with the person. I mean, we spend countless hours on the phone every night, and we've spent time in each other's homes and all that kind of thing. We've met each other's families. We're not 20-year-olds now that are kind of going into this a little bit blindly. We both know that we're a little bit set in our ways, and so we've worked through a lot of those things to try and figure out who the other person really is. And one thing I've appreciated is his honesty that matches my honesty, and letting each other see who we really are, right? Mm-hmm. So that we're not blindsided by things. I mean, I'm sure there'll still be lots of wonderful growing opportunities, right? But it's so wonderful to have met someone who is so willing to partner, and so appreciative and committed to the Lord and committed to me, and just able to help me, who brings joy to me for one thing, right? But also I can feel myself progressing with, and look forward to that future with him.
That's amazing. I'm sorry, his name again?
Mike Fawn.
Mike Fawn. Hello, Mike Fawn. Bring her back regularly for a visit, okay? We're losing her to you.
He feels a little bit bad about that, but It's kind of harder to move a farm than it is to move a law practice, so...
Yeah, that makes sense.
There you go.
But I'm sure you'll be very happy
Absolutely.
wherever you go. And you'll bring joy to the people that you'll encounter when you move down there. And I'm sure,
Well, that would be my hope, that I can be a blessing.
Yeah, you will be. So, thank you. All right. So take us a little farther now in your professional career. Currently, what are you doing? I know you're self-employed, but what is it that you do?
I'm shutting down my practice at the moment, obviously, in preparation for moving, but I practice family law.
Yeah.
And that's the only official profession that I'm in at the moment. I have, at times in the past, worked part-time as a therapist, as a marriage and family therapist, but I'm not doing that currently.
Okay, so that comes from that social work background that you have.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy doing that?
Doing therapy?
Doing therapy, yeah.
Well, I'm not quite sure I could really say that I don't still do a little bit, right? I mean, when couples come into your, well, not couples, when someone comes into your office, in Canada, in Ontario anyway, you are obligated, well, I guess it's in Canada because it's under the Divorce Act, but you are obligated to canvass with them if there's anything that could save this marriage. And you don't go into a whole lot of that, right? But
I didn't know that. I thought if someone comes to you, and so just to clarify, for me and for any listeners that are not aware, family law means basically divorce. You're dealing with divorces,
yes,
right?
Divorce, custody, access, child support, property, anything to do with that. And I do a little bit of children's aid work as well.
Okay. And so you must see a lot in the course of the work that you do. Is it gloomy sometimes?
It can be.
Yeah.
Certainly there are things that are unhappy there, right?
Yeah.
But I kind of see it as... So first of all, I get to be where it matters most to people, right? And I find that a privilege. I mean, that's one of the things that has always humbled me, is to be allowed or to be trusted enough with things that are so close to people's hearts, right? And I kind of see my job as helping people get through one of the worst times of their lives a little more gracefully than they might otherwise accomplish.
So when they come to you, and is it usually one party or both of them come to you?
It's just one.
It's usually, okay, one of them comes to you and says, I got to get out of this relationship. It's killing me. Can you please help me out?
Right.
And so you're saying you're obligated to try to...
Right. It doesn't have to be the first thing out of my mouth, right? Because sometimes that would just make them angry. Right. They're already way past that. But you kind of feel that out, right? And some of them it's as short as a sentence on each side, but others you get to explore that more, right? So I remember a couple of years ago I had a lady come to me who said that she had decided to come to me because a friend of hers had come to me a year or so before. And this woman assured me that she was adamant that she wanted to get divorced. There was no way that she was saving her marriage. But her friend had come to me the year before, and I had said to her, well, have you thought about trying this? After hearing her story and things that were going on. And apparently, because I never heard back from her, apparently she went home and tried it and was now very happily married to the same man. And so she wanted to come to someone who thought that way, even though she did not want to save her own marriage. So that was really kind of cool.
You know what? To me, that's a little weird. I didn't know that. Okay, so as a lawyer, a divorce, is it divorce lawyer is that a right way of saying it?
Yeah, family law.
Okay.
I mean,
someone that they go to you because they want to get a divorce. Do you sort of get to play the therapist sometimes too, or is that sort of...
Well, that's not a hat that you should assume, right?
No, but
I do have that side, so I'm upfront with them about that, right?
Yeah.
And it is my job to canvass with them if there's something that would help.
Yeah.
And so if they're open to it, then, not to therapy. I'm not a therapist to my law clients.
Right, of course.
In any kind of official sense,
Of course, yeah.
But you build a relationship with your lawyer where you're talking about, how do I get through this? How do I handle that, right? How do I find the best win-win situation? How do I protect my children? I mean, it's not all about fighting, right? Lawyers don't have to be... In fact, the most ethical lawyers, in my opinion, are those that are really looking for how to help the whole family move forward. If there's a winner and a loser, then for sure, if there are children, those children are losers.
Yeah.
Right? You have one parent win over the other, and the whole family has lost. And so that's kind of...
Now, okay, so I'm just... The thing I'm having a tough time getting my head around is, and I'm just not thinking of you, but just thinking of a lawyer who basically talks himself out of a job.
I love that.
I'm sure you do.
I love that.
I'm sure you do, but isn't that sort of it kind of goes against it? It's a bit of a conflict.
That's my favorite reason to be fired. Absolutely, hands down, my favorite reason.
Well,
and there's enough people coming through the door that, those are the days where that's where I've really done a good job, right? Is where someone is able to fix them.
Wow,
their family.
You don't sound like the stereotypical lawyer, but that's quite amazing.
There's so many lawyers that are actually very, very ethical and very invested in human beings. It's not the best job.
I know lawyers get such a bad reputation. I know that's
so if you can actually do it in a way that makes a difference to a family, that's a huge, huge bonus.
Well, that alone is quite interesting. I've never heard of that before. But I'm quite delighted that...
Well, there's lots of, the direction that law is going. If we can keep people out of the court system, that's got to be one of the worst places for a family to be, right?
For sure,
So if you can do negotiation, mediation, collaborative family law, there's a lot of ways to handle it so that you don't leave such carnage behind in how you do it. And depending on who you get as opposing counsel, if there is counsel on the other side, there are some lawyers where it's going to be carnage all the way, right? Or you get someone who, a client on your side or the other side who simply is not able... first of all, I probably don't have a lot of clients where they don't get that, because they're either going to hear it straight from me and get their heads in shape, or we're probably not going to last very long in a partnership, right?
Yeah.
But if you have someone on the other side, where legal battles can become so contentious and have to go to long trials, is where the other side has issues that don't allow them to see what they're doing. That don't allow them to see the damage that they're doing to their children or to themselves. And where children need to be protected, you've got to fight the fight, because that's the only mandatory way to get through it, right? To get to a resolution. So there are times where you simply have to do the litigation, but where you can do it with less emotional damage. There's such a... Obviously lawyers cost money, but what people don't realize enough is the emotional cost of being in litigation. And so where you can help them with that's where the surviving it gracefully comes in, right?
Yeah.
So that you can do that a little less nastily.
Now, I got a question for you. Does it ever get nasty in the courtroom?
Absolutely.
And when I'm talking to you, and I know you, the people that do know you, you're the most kindest, gentlest person in the world.
And sometimes I just see red.
Can you get real bold and real scary?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about scary. So there's lots of different skills that lawyers bring, right? And most lawyers don't have all of the good lawyer skills, right? So can I be bold? Yes. Can I be nasty? In a quiet sort of, here's the facts, thank you very much kind of way, right? I certainly have realized that there are times where I'm not seeing things clearly because I'm really put off by something on the other side, right? And so I start to lose perspective. And that's one of the areas where I think all human beings, but myself in particular, there's so much that we can learn about what we miss when we start to see red, And so I'm not given to temper, but I can be annoyed to the point of losing perspective. Yeah, so that's something that I actively try to pay attention to.
And when you do catch yourself, what do you do?
Well, so a couple of years ago, I went to Europe for about a month. Took a month off, and when I came back, you have such a break, right? Although I had to deal with some law stuff while I was gone, by and large, I didn't have to think about law for all that time. So I came back, and on the weekend before I went back to work, I could feel the tenseness in myself. I could feel myself taking this contentious mantle back on myself. And I thought, ooh, I don't like this, because I'm not naturally contentious. And I really do prefer peace, And I'm not an in-your-face kind of person. If you Which, one of the things that I have loved about the scriptures is Doctrine and Covenants section 121, where it talks about, or is it 88? I always get those two mixed up. Where it talks about where real power comes from, right? That no power or influence can or ought to be maintained by virtue of the priesthood alone, which applies equally well to women, right? And where you do it right, then power flows to you without compulsory means. That has been, I'm so grateful for that chapter, because it's taught me where real power comes from. It comes from the respect that people have because of how you are and who you are, right? Yeah. Anyway, so sometimes in law, I lose that perspective, and I use whatever other tool I have that's not nearly as good a tool in the box, right? And so anyway, so I could feel that coming on, and I thought, I don't like this. I don't like it at all. Is there anything I can do to change that, right? Can I practice law, or do I need to get out of law, or like, what is that, right? And as I prayerfully pondered that, what came to mind was, there were times where I was losing perspective because I was in contentious mode, because the other person just sets me off, right? There's something about them that just pushes my buttons, and I'm just not my usual calm. Yeah, I'm just not myself, right? And so, so I was prayerful about that, and then I thought about my two most contentious cases, and as I really pondered about them, it occurred to me that what I needed to do was really see the case from the other side's perspective more than I'd been able to so far. And specific ideas came to mind as to how I could validate what they were trying to get, right? I could help my client see their side of it a little bit better too. Anyways, shockingly, both of those cases settled very quickly, because we were able to negotiate something that addressed what both sides really felt was important. I lose that perspective all the time, but whenever I find myself in the thick of it and being a person less of a person than I would like to be, I try to remind myself of that, and to get back to that perspective where I have respect for the other person. I'm not treating them condescendingly. I'm trying to understand them and helping them to see, and my client to see, how this can go forward as a win-win, or as close to a win-win as a family